shame is expressed in a supportive, protected space, it can't stay as strong. Shame dissolves when it's spoken in safe spaces. As a bisexual, pansexual guy, I, in my 20s, found myself really flip-flopping from relationships between men and women, and there was infidelity and there was all sorts of kind of shadowy parts of myself. It would collapse in the most horrible, hurtful way. And so I got to this point where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I need to seek out help.
When you were growing up, did you have a strong sense of your bisexuality and pansexuality kind of quite young?
That was a harsh way for my mum to really get a sense of what my sexuality was. So I'm a queer-affirming Gestalt therapist, and I've been practicing in private practice for a year and a half or so, and had a really beautiful journey studying Gestalt therapy here in Sydney. And part of the reason that I got into Gestalt therapy is because I'm quite involved with a group called Naked Man, which we can probably talk about a little bit later in the podcast. But my then mentor, Kurt, who runs Naked Man, gave me a very firm but gentle nudge towards Gestalt therapy. He's also a therapist himself. And yeah, I am so grateful that I took that journey, and I'm here supporting queer community and supporting people navigating open relationships and ethical non-monogamy. I got a lovely little practice in Glebe. So I'm about to head there after our chat, actually, to see some clients.
Amazing. So I guess there's a few things to break down there. So Gestalt therapy, queer-affirming.
Yes.
So why don't we take it from the queer-affirming part of it? So what is a queer-affirming therapist?
So as a queer person myself, I think it's really important to have therapists out there that understand some of the nuances of queer identity and sexuality and life experience. So I call myself queer-affirming because it's really like a welcome invitation for clients who are, fluid in their sexuality or fluid in their gender or trans or non-binary, to like come into a space where queer-affirming, gives them a nice idea that they're not going to be judged. They're not going to have to over-explain themselves too much. I mean, my role as a therapist also is to ask questions, but I already have some ground there with them. And I think that's a really lovely way to already create some support and protection, because therapy is a really vulnerable experience.
And Gestalt therapy. Would you be able to tell us about that? Yeah,
Yes.
Did I say it correctly?
You did. I mean, there's a few different ways to pronounce it, but I go with the German Gestalt.
Oh, I love it. Sounds great when you say it. Yeah.
My 4 years in Berlin have helped me with some German pronunciation. So it's a really relational style of therapy. So it's not hierarchical, perhaps like might be found in psychology or psychiatry, but I'm really there wanting to walk this journey alongside my clients, and I bring curiosity. I very much work in the here and now and get curious about what's going on for them as they're telling me about this thing that happened to them. And it's a really beautiful way to use my own emotional body and my own nervous system to kind of hold space and co-regulate with my clients, but also let them know that, they also have an impact on me as I'm having an impact on them. So we're curious about what's going on in between. I like to say that the therapy room is like a microcosm of the macro in the outside world. So clients can come in and they can have these experiences that maybe are familiar, or there's patterns showing up in the therapy room, and that helps to raise awareness to what might be going on for them, or it might resonate with things that keep on happening for them out in the wide world.
Well, that's a beautiful way to kind of look at therapy as well, because I've gone to therapy in the past, like traditional talk-based therapy. And often when I'm unloading on the therapist, I feel like they're almost like a sounding board, and there's not that kind of relationship where it's a give and take. It feels like I'm kind of giving my experience, they're kind of absorbing that, and then as straight faced as possible going, okay, well tell me more. But I feel like it sounds like the Gestalt therapy, there is that kind of energetic exchange that's happening, which makes sense because of course as a therapist, these things that people are telling you are often very deep things, and you would feel that sense of the kind of like the weight of that.
Totally. I mean, relationships are these beautiful mirrors and exchanges. So if I was to sit there like a cold, blank wall while someone's, pouring their heart out to me, that's such a disservice and a missed opportunity. Whereas Gestalt therapy is really, there's times where I'm crying in session with clients, letting them know how impacted I am by them. And that can be a beautiful healing moment for them to really feel that relational electricity. It's like a contact high between us where we're really, it's like heart to heart, almost soul to soul connection in some ways. There's, to pull back the curtain a little bit on psychotherapy, there's this place that I'm often looking to find a way towards where we dissolve the I and they or I and you, and we go to I, thou. And it's basically like a coming together and I guess, feeling the shared humanity of moments. Instead of the separation between two beings, it's like dissolving into, we're here. We are almost like we are one without getting too spiritual and esoteric. Yeah, that can be like a golden ray of sunshine in the therapy room.
Yeah, wow, the interconnected nature of everything and beings. Yeah.
Mm.
AI can't give you that, people. So for anyone listening who's on the ChatGPT AI therapy, it's not going to be the same. Obviously, with this therapy, there'd be some boundaries at play as well. So how do you navigate boundaries as well with the people who you see?
Great question. Because therapy, we have an hour session. So time is really important to honor boundaries. We start when we agree to start. We end when we agree to end. There's a payment involved. All of that is like contracting. But there's also how much do I share in the space? And, we kept on getting told again and again in our training, I think the line is like as little as possible, as much as necessary. It's erring on the side of like less is often more. But if I am to share something, it's for the benefit of the client. If it's relevant to their presenting issue, if I have a sense that that's actually going to help them on their awareness raising or sitting in their uncertainty, or that block or obstacle or pain that they're journeying. If a client comes in and talks about how they've just lost a parent, I lost my dad very suddenly in my late 20s. So that has been something that I've used with discretion, but I have been able to reach to. And if they're in, existential heartache of losing a parent, it can be really profound for me to be able to say, I lost my dad 11 years ago very suddenly, and I just want you to know that I get a little bit of a sense of where you're at right now, and I want you to know you're not alone in that.
That's the very human aspect of your approach, it's a very case by case situation with how much you would share depending on what would be of benefit to them.
True.
So you wouldn't want it to be a distraction, but sometimes, reaching into that lived experience is so important.
Yeah, and sometimes clients want to know things. They'll ask like, tell me a bit more about this or that. I want to know, has this happened to you? My first point would be, well, I'm curious, what's prompting you to ask me that? Is there some discomfort that you're sitting with right now? And it doesn't mean that I won't share or answer that question, but it's a lovely opportunity to experiment with, okay, what's going on in this dynamic where you're feeling really compelled to want to know this from me right now? So there's many different ways that we can look at these moments and work with them. And it's always for the benefit of the client to raise awareness for what's going on in their internal world and making sense of their experience.
So you mentioned the loss of your father. Was that part of the journey of that part of what kind of pushed you into this wanting to explore being a therapist?
In a strange way, yes.
Yeah.
In like a long route, I got
Yeah.
there because my dad passed away and it sent me on a course to work with a psychologist. I was down in Melbourne at the time, and that psychologist actually said, you know what you should do? You should go try yoga. And that psychologist, I thank her because she actually got me on this path to becoming more embodied and more aware of my internal world and sensations. So, you know, I don't think that psychology work was super profound for me, but it was so supportive in just helping me, you know, process a bit of my dad passing away and also a relationship ending at the same time. But it wasn't until I got to Berlin. So I was going to move to Berlin, and then my dad passed away and I needed to put it off for a little bit. And then the next year I said, all right, I'm going to do it. Dad would want me to do it. Mom and my sister, they're going, all right, like I can move to the other side of the world, which was an exciting but also terrifying, you know, leap of faith. And I went over there thinking, okay, I'll try it out for 12 months. At least like that wouldn't be a complete flop if I stay for a year. And I ended up staying there for over 4 years. And it was while I was in Berlin that I reached out to a therapist and had a really healing experience around a very confusing and frustrating experience I was having trying to make sense of my sexuality and relationships, because as a bisexual, pansexual guy, I kind of in my 20s found myself really flip-flopping from relationships between men and women, and there was infidelity and there was all sorts of kind of shadowy parts of myself, and I was needing to kind of silo bits and keep things secret, and it would collapse in the most horrible, hurtful way for, you know, my ex and myself. And so I got to this point where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I need to seek out help. So I think, you know, my dad passing, seeing a psychologist in Melbourne, finding yoga, going to Berlin, doing more yoga, having some relationship breakdowns, and then finding a therapist in Berlin. That's the long journey around.
What a journey.
Yeah.
But the way that this therapist, this beautiful woman, was able to take me on a journey where I could celebrate my fluid sexuality, I was like, whoa, that was huge.
Wow.
Yeah, from this place of like shame and pushing it into the shadows and fighting against it to like, oh no, this is actually what makes me beautiful and unique and sensitive and very like, fluid and alive. Yeah, that was a very profound part of my journey.
And so up until that point, had you been identifying as a straight man, or like what's the sort of timeline, or how is your coming into your liberated experience been?
I think I had a few stepping stones on my sexuality and my identity expanding. So in Sydney, you know, I grew up here in Sydney, so I was straight-ish and kind of had little flings and dated some guys, but it wasn't until I moved to Melbourne that I was able to feel like, okay, I can open myself up a little bit more to different possibilities, and dated a guy for 6 months down there. And I was like, okay, yeah, there's something alive there for me, but also still some fear and some internalized homophobia. And then when I moved to Berlin, one of the queer capitals of the world, and just immersing in the party culture and the queer like expansiveness of that city, like whatever you're wanting to find, you can tap into in Berlin, which is a beautiful thing, and it can also be really treacherous as well. And I had a few friends that started to fall through the cracks with, you know, partying and substance abuse and like, you know, sex, drugs, techno. Like it's very intoxicating, but it can also be a personal development portal. Like I had some really profound experiences on dance floors, at clubs, just, you know, at times like even spiritual and healing moments. So, I mean, I'm so grateful to have like had that time in Berlin and carry some of those
Yeah.
threads and experiences back here and to share them and continue seeding that energy and community as well.
So you felt like the craziness of Berlin actually helped you kind of really zero in on where your sexuality, like, did you feel like you went to Berlin a little unsure and then you left Berlin like very certain in where you are
I
in
had a
terms of
lot
sexuality?
more, I had a lot more anchoring in my sexuality. I mean, it's still fluid and it's still moving around, but I feel like, I'm a boat with its anchor down. I can still move around on the surface of the water, and maybe sometimes it gets a bit more turbulent and a bit confusing, but I have that anchoring that really got cemented from the therapy work I did in Berlin.
When you're engaging in those relationships and say you're dating a woman, for example, is that something like you immediately would share that, I'm pansexual, I'm bisexual, I'm interested in men as well? Because, I imagine that there might be some stigma around sharing with women because they think, oh, well, you're just going to leave me for a man, or there might be all these preconceptions that people might have when you're going into those dating relationships.
Yeah, 100%. I needed to learn that the hard way, and that was part of the pain of my time in Berlin, at times dating women and kind of needing to downplay that part of me. I didn't completely not share, but I got a sense that it can be threatening for some people. And so I tried to kind of be a little bit more, reduce it or not speak about it so much. But unfortunately, that creates like a shadow and a siloing. And that's the kind of fertile ground where secrets and infidelity and energy is channeled off in different places, which kept on having really hurtful, damaging consequences. So now, I have learned those lessons and I'm a lot more open and upfront. This is who I am. This is, how my sexuality flows. This is what I'm looking for in relationship. I mean, that's the only way to do it that feels right. Right for me now. I'm curious why I stumbled on that right word just then, but it feels like, the honoring way of my journey.
You shared about some internalized homophobia as well. At a conversation night that we had in Canberra a number of years ago, somebody was sharing about they were coming out of a religious, religious background. They were married, had family, and exploring polyamory. And through the explorations of polyamory, also began to realize, this man realized that he was bisexual as well. But as he was sitting in the room, he shared, I'm realizing that I'm bisexual, but I'm also deeply homophobic still when I'm here in the room. And there are a lot of queer people in the room. And he said, I'm here, I'm homophobic and I'm bisexual. And I'm just, at the very, very beginning of this. And it made me think a lot about the connections between non-monogamy, sort of learning about non-monogamy, which can then open up doors for sexuality because it's now an option, or sometimes also through sexuality, learning, more about your sexuality and that discovery, the connection then to explore non-monogamy. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is how courageous of that man to really step in and name the thing that sounds like it was really difficult and confronting and a risk to say in that space. So I'm like noticing my sense of like, wow, that's really courageous. And also I feel really proud for him in that moment.
Do you find that there are often ways where if somebody is exploring non-monogamy, that they might then have these unravelings or these revealings of their sexuality and sort of vice versa? And have you noticed, perhaps my question is, have you noticed if one might often lead to the other, or if, which might be more of an influence?
Yeah, I certainly think it can happen. I see it through my own experience as a queer person, and I see queerness not only as sexuality and attraction based, but it's also, a political and social agitation. So if I I'm queer, I am questioning the norms, I'm questioning the molds, the lenses, all these things that I've grown up through, you know, the teachings, the heteronormative expectations. So, you know, as a queer person, there's also a more accessible, I think, avenue to move into those spaces where relationships can be really alternative looking and they can be ethically non-monogamous and open, because I'm already letting go of or pushing against a lot of the kind of social expectations and the norms. So yeah, I think if you're either questioning your sexuality or you're moving more into non-monogamous spaces, like those two things can have a beautiful opportunity to dance and be questioned and kind of yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, one leads to the other or they have some threads interlinking them.
Because the questioning is so important. And one thing that certainly I found in that moment when he shared that, it was such a brave thing to share in a group of people. And I really felt this sense of vulnerability on his behalf, which probably you felt just then when we were recounting the story.
Yeah.
And it made me wonder, you know, as men, you know, how do we create those safe spaces where you could say something like, I actually feel that there is some internalized homophobia. I don't like it. I know it's not something that I want, but to unpack it, I actually have to voice it and potentially have very uncomfortable conversations with other men, other women, you know, whoever you might be having those conversations with. So how do you think we can create those spaces where men can start to really look into themselves and go, is there some sort of internalized homophobia here?
Obvious answer as a therapist, I'm going to say therapy. But then the other avenues, as well as therapy, is spaces like men's groups. I'm part of a queer men's circle. I run a queer relational group on Monday nights. But having these supportive and protective spaces to voice the parts that might hold some shame. If shame is expressed in a supportive, protected space, it can't stay as strong as it was when it was just internalized. Like shame dissolves when it's spoken in safe spaces. And that is something that needs to be experienced. Like, yes, we can intellectually accept that that is true, but it's not until I actually take that risk, step into the vulnerable thing, speak the piece that is holding some shame, and realize, oh, that person isn't going to reject me. They're not going to push me away. They're not going to judge me. They're actually going to say, you know, well, thank you for sharing. That sounded really courageous to share. I'm like, I'm grateful you've shared it with me. Then that person might have a experience of, oh, that shame that felt really big doesn't feel as big anymore. And that's already the process of the shame transmuting, transforming, changing underway.
And also comes back to the importance of that in-person connection as well, because I feel like so much can get lost online. You can't really, you know, read someone's intention or their understanding. And you know, through different communities of people, we can sometimes, there can be that othering, or I don't fit in here, you know, or like these, you know, the people who are liberated and queer and they're out, they might not accept me, you know, if I'm sharing this shame that I have. And the beautiful thing about that night and the way that he shared was how the room held him so well. And every other person who spoke after him just said, thank you so much for sharing that. You know, I'm gay or I'm queer. I see you, like I can see your intention. It was so connecting and beautiful in times where everything can feel quite divisive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And as you were sharing just then, I got reminded of, even in my queer relational group that I co-facilitate with another therapist friend of mine, you know, a topic that often comes up is this, am I queer enough? You know, am I worthy of being in this queer space? You know, there's a couple in there that are polyamorous, open, a male and female couple. And, you know, there was some really healthy discussion and some real welcoming and receiving them into the queer space. And it's really beautiful to have those heart open moments, and it just is so affirming to be in those spaces and like, yes, this is a healing space. This is a space of connection and contact.
Well, speaking of spaces, you mentioned just before we started this recording about this particular retreat that you're going to be involved in. Can you tell us a little bit about this retreat? Because it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, so it's even bigger than a retreat. It's a camp. It's almost like a festival. So I think I mentioned in my intro, I'm quite involved with Naked Man, which is a same-sex attracted men's organization that does a whole bunch of workshops and retreats. And in November each year, they do a big camp. And so about 300 men come together on some land 90 minutes northwest of Sydney, and there's a lovely creek there, and we camp, and there's cabins, but there's also a whole bunch of different workshops running. So facilitators come from all over the country and offer some of their latest workshops around sexuality, embodiment, massage, connection, emotional vulnerability. So it's a smorgasbord of different things for men to try, and not only get in touch with their erotic body and sexuality, but also tap into connection, and that's something that's so needed in community. And it's such a beautiful 4-day experience, and we have parties in the evenings, and there's like talent shows and drag performances. It's a real hoot. Like it's I've been going for the past few years, and each time I go, I come out feeling so expansive and nourished.
Wow. And so is everybody naked the entire time? Is that sort of the idea?
That's the idea. Weather dependent. Mother Nature kind of has a little bit to say about that. You gotta look after yourself. But when the sun is shining during the day, there's a lot of skin. And it's not only physical nakedness, but also an opportunity to tap into that emotional vulnerability and that like nakedness around the heart space as well, which is such a beautiful experience to witness over those 4 days of community, big community becoming closer and closer and closer knit. Yeah.
I imagine that when there's those early moments of taking off your clothes and stepping into the space, you know, with everybody, and it would feel quite overwhelming. But then by the end of the weekend, it probably just feels completely natural, like we're back to the earth.
It feels strange to put clothes back on at the end of the 4 days. And we do a really beautiful opening ceremony and closing ceremony. So there's real ritual and holding around that journey of becoming naked and seeing one another, and then also preparing to like transition out of that little utopia that we created.
Are some people quite reticent to get naked in the first place? Do people kind of
if you're signing up for a 4-day naked festival,
you know what to expect.
You might have a little bit of trepidation, but you're kind of also secretly a bit excited about it, I think.
And do you get to the end of it and think we should all just move to a nudist colony? Like, why are we even wearing clothes in society?
I mean, I'm sure that's discussed quite a lot over the 4 days. Yeah.
Because recently I did a beautiful breathwork workshop, and it was a men's only kind of breathwork workshop. And it was one of the first times in recent memory where I've been in a very intentional space just with men. And Abby runs these beautiful women's retreats and holds a lot of space for kind of women's groups. But because we don't, as part of Evolving Love, we don't run any men's things, like I'm often not just in those spaces just with men, but I found it to be such a powerful experience. And I'd love to ask your thoughts on it, because it felt like there was this very particular energy that came from being surrounded by men who were sharing so beautifully. And the breath work, you know, at the end of it, some of the men in the group actually opened up and said, you know, I've never talked about my emotions. You know, like this has unlocked an ability for me through this process. And then suddenly here we are in a room of, you know, there were 6 of us, everyone's crying, you know, it was just the most vulnerable and beautiful experience. And I wonder, like, where do you think the power comes from in kind of men kind of gathering together and being vulnerable with each other?
Yeah, I think there's real lineage to sacred women and sacred men's work. I also think there's definitely a place for all gender spaces as well. Love to like move between those men's spaces and all gender spaces, and I feel like I get different transmissions from those holdings and constellations. But I think there's something when men come together and feel supported and protected, that they can let their guard down, that in a way that might be difficult in an all gendered environment for, who knows, fear of judgment, not wanting to look weak in front of women, or I say that with quotation marks, like weak, because I think vulnerability is a strength. But there is I think there's like a fraternal camaraderie that can happen when men congregate, and if they congregate with the intention of really taking care of one another, that can be a very healing experience. And I've noticed it on retreat after retreat with this Naked Man community as well, like going off to a lovely retreat center for a few days and letting the city and all the baggage that comes with day-to-day life, like being amongst nature, being amongst, like-minded folk. And it can be a very heart-opening experience.
Are there ever any straight men who might attend the Naked Men's Retreat, like for the experience of it being with other men, but enjoying
certainly.
being naked and in that space?
Yeah, there's some men that have wives and kids that come along because that's an aspect of themselves that they're wanting some space to express and explore. And I think that's really lovely that it's not just contained to gay men, but there's a whole spectrum of men that show up. Trans men, non-binary folk are also really welcome in that space. So I think there's a whole diverse range of people that come together, which makes it so special as well.
And so what are the workshops that you're running at this particular event?
They're still forming and coming together, but last year I ran a workshop called Cocktails, which is like a circle to drop into our relationship with our genitals and the stories that we hold. And it mixed in some lovely art therapy moments where we could illustrate our like energetic cock and kind of create a mandala together. And there was a bit of self-pleasure ritual involved as well. Another one I've run is like a dom sub switch playpen workshop where you get an opportunity to work with a partner and come to an agreement about a certain scene that you want to play out, and you get a chance to be the dom and then also be the sub in that same situation, and really, I guess, an opportunity to collapse the polarities as well. So seeing that experience and having that experience from both sides to really, even though you might have more resonance with being dominant or being submissive, like to have both the roles and then an opportunity to switch between the roles is a really lovely way of kind of shaking things up and having new experiences, finding some new confidence to play as well.
The journey of your, understanding and connection with power dynamics and dominance and submission, did that all sort of come, did that come out for you sort of around the same time of being in Berlin and that exploration of your sexuality? Was that sort of all happening all at the same time?
It was actually a return visit to Berlin that I got to go along to a great queer embodiment festival called Stretch. And there was another facilitator, an Australian guy, Jeremy, that ran a similar workshop around dominance and submission. And I got so much out of that. I also facilitated my own workshop there, but I connected with Jeremy. And after the festival, I was like, I love this so much. Like, how would you feel about me kind of taking some of these aspects from the workshop and kind of turning it into parts of my own stuff as well and sharing it with the Naked Man community? And he gave me his blessing, and it's kind of like evolved through there. So I feel so grateful to like go around to different festivals and retreats and kind of experience other pieces and glean what resonates and kind of share it on as well. It's like a lovely cross-pollinating process.
All these workshops sound amazing. Like this cocktails workshop, I'm kind of struck a chord, so to speak.
Nice.
I feel like you would love that.
Yeah, well, it's something that, of course, as men, that we have a relationship to our genitals.
Yeah.
And often it's like a very complicated relationship. Often men, there is a sense of maybe it's like internalized shame around their genitals, or there is this like obsession with size.
Yeah, we can ask a lot of our cock, like, is it big enough? Is it going to get hard? Is it going to stay hard? Am I going to last long enough? Like, all these kind of pressures that we put on ourselves to perform, and having a space like cocktails to hear each other share about, do we have a name for our cock as well? That's something that we're also playing with in cocktails.
What would my name be? I don't know. Is this a human name, or is it like it could be
whatever name?
What are some examples? I'm so interested.
Do you have a name for yours? I mean, you don't have to share it, of course.
I did with my last partner, but I won't.
Okay.
I won't.
No, that's right. No, keep
that
it.
Relationship is no longer alive, so that name also dissolved with it.
So do you find that with different partners you'll have different names?
Yeah. It kind of evolves, and there's kind of like pet names and kind of a little bit of pillow talk, and
right.
I love that. That's so playful and fun.
Permission to the listeners and watchers to, like, if you don't have a name for your genitals, like what would it be like to like gift them a name?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about that?
No, but I'm feeling like I would want something very regal.
For your vagina? Yeah, okay. I'm trying to think of a regal name. I'm just thinking of all the Queen Elizabeth is.
No, I don't want Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, that's a bit weird. I'm trying to think of the different regal names.
I don't know.
And then that's like really.
You need a title.
Yeah, what would you name my cock?
I don't know.
Okay. We'll get back to you.
Yeah.
We'll have to let you know.
Some time to ruminate. It'll come through when it comes through.
But then is it something that you can also with your partner? It's like an enjoyable thing to kind of name it together, like name your genitals. So with the input. So as you said, like there was a previous name like that you had for your penis in a previous relationship, and then like moving into different relationships, you have different names.
Yeah, that's my experience so far. Right. You develop like personal jokes with your partners, and there's these little things that just the two of you share, and sometimes like giving genitals names and affectionate little kind of cute nicknames is part of that.
And also what it does by doing that is it creates like a humorous undertone, because often we can be so obsessed with like sex being performative or script based.
Yes.
But then as soon as you have that kind of the joy and the humor and the Frank or whatever you, I don't know why I'd call my cock Frank. I probably wouldn't call my cock Frank.
Frank and beans.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like Frank, Frank's not working out today or something. Like you can play into that.
That's right.
And
it takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
Because sex is play after all.
Right.
And there's so much pressure, and I speak from my own experience and journeys with it. There's so much pressure that can be put on sex to like look a certain way and, have echoes of the porn that has been enjoyed and like the eroticism and the kind of arousal that comes off that space. But, sex between two humans or three humans or four humans, however you want to play.
300.
That's right. Maybe 300 if you come to camp. Yeah. To be able to like treat that as a creative, playful exploration and to keep an open mind to what emerges can allow for so much more like, I guess the nervous system can relax a lot more, and it actually can allow the pleasure to expand all through the body and not be so genital focused and tense. And, particularly for men that have some trouble with premature ejaculation or they're wanting to last longer, it can be around, allowing some of those muscles, particularly around the groin, to soften and taking some breaths. And if there's a more playful approach there, that's a much easier path a lot of the time to having a longer experience if that's what they're looking for.
This is such wisdom also that I feel like straight people can get from the queer community. I mean, I know for me personally, I've learned so much from listening to Dan Savage for so long, like the playful elements, all of the, the dominant submission, or, just thinking of things in ways that just, those conversations just weren't happening, with my friends in straight married relationships. And I just feel like it's so beautiful to learn from the queer community because of all of the imagination. It's like you would feel like, I mean, perhaps like you're writing your own script. It's full of imagination and creativity.
And that's why I think all gender, all sexuality spaces are so important, because we get to like learn off each other. And, as a queer person, I can share my own experiences and journeys and experimentation. And then, maybe there's a couple there that have been married for 30 years and, there's some pieces around commitment and containment and like dedication and loyalty that are really important for me to receive as well. It's because that hasn't been so much of my lived experience. We share off each other.
And is that something that you find with the Gestalt? Hopefully I said that right. Was that better? Okay, I'm trying to work on it. I'm trying to work on it. But is that something with these kind of energetic exchanges? Do you find yourself, you're also learning, as the process happens with the people that are coming to see you, you're kind of taking the wisdom? Because that's something that we find when we're holding conversation circles. There is this beautiful energy and this vulnerability that when everyone shares it within the room, like we feel like we're also learning, we're constantly kind of sharpening our communication skills and our relationship and our ability to kind of relate to each other. But is that something that you're finding by being surrounded by these kind of like conversations that you're having with?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, parallel process is a real thing in the therapy room. So a client might come in with a presenting issue and I'm like, wow, that's like got some similarities to either something that has happened for me in the past or something that is actually unfolding for me. And, it's my job as a therapist and I'm trained to be able to bracket that stuff. But, sometimes if I'm bringing my curiosity to their experience, there can be not only an awareness raising for them, but there can also be a little bit of processing happening in the background here as well, to again, like open up the curtain to what happens, behind the smoke screens of psychotherapy, because it can be a bit like mystical and mysterious. But yeah, I'm a human with my own shit, my own stuff. So, that can happen as well. We learn from each other.
I remember there was one conversation evening and someone at the start of our conversation evenings, everyone kind of goes around the circle and says, what they're comfortable sharing in terms of their relationship structures or their experience with non-monogamy. And I remember at a Sydney conversation evening, it started off, and one of the first people to share just went straight into, I'm a relationship anarchist, like we don't have any rules, like it's kind of completely wild. And the way that she was sharing about it, I could see, I mean, we were both kind of sitting next to each other going, oh, wow, this is pretty fun. And I could feel the room being triggered, by the sharing, because it was like, it was so, for people who hadn't really exposed themselves to thinking about, what a relationship, anarchist relationship might look like. It was just like this barrage of like hypotheticals that people are kind of running through in their mind.
Yeah, and what a gift that is for her to be in the space and to like agitate what might be expected and to give something a little bit different in there. Yeah, I notice, that sounds pretty alive what was going on there as she was bringing in that different spin, the anarchy spin.
In your Gestalt therapy, is that therapy available for younger people as well, like adolescents, teenagers?
I myself don't work with adolescents, like adults 18 plus is who I work with, but there's certainly some great Gestalt therapists out there that work with teenagers and kids. And, there's a little bit of a different approach. It's still very relational, but, kids have a different way of relating. So, yeah, I certainly encourage if if, there's parents out there with kids that are struggling with something in their life, maybe it's, their identity, or if they're a teenager, maybe it's sexuality issues or whatever it may be. I think Gestalt can be a really lovely modality to support.
We have a son. He'll be 7 in October, and people often ask us, when do you think you'll tell him about non-monogamy, or how will all of that come to be? And we always come back to this place of, everything at an age appropriate time, but sort of feeding, helping him, guide him through the way of like, there are so many different ways of being, and we actually are almost using like queer relationships as an example of like acceptance. We have queer family members, and that there are many different ways to love and to be in connection, and whether it's with multiple people or we don't really say multiple people just yet. We're sort of dropping it in a little bit, but it's totally beautiful for for lesbian, gay relationship, any person, and so I think that's a really good foundation as well. But yeah, I'm wondering if you have any advice for, perhaps for us in the future with our, how to navigate, sharing with our son about, non-monogamy or anything like that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're both taking a really beautiful approach already, like honoring age appropriate disclosure of information, but sounds like you're already, bringing diversity into the mix with him, which is a great foundation. I think, letting him know that there's so many different ways that people can be in the world, and they're all valid. And, I'm not a parent myself, not yet. Who knows what the future may bring. But yeah, I think there's an intuition that you have as parents to kind of know when the time is right for those conversations, and also allowing questions to be asked, and not giving kids a sense that there's like secrets, but also explaining that that information is appropriate for now, and then I'm going to tell you some more like a little bit later on the journey. It's like it's honoring an unfolding process. And also it's a benefit of not overwhelming a younger person when they're still making sense of the world as well. I mean, I'm still making sense of the world.
Yeah. We all are. We're all trying to figure it out. I mean, because when you were growing up, did you have a strong sense of your bisexuality and pansexuality kind of quite young? Was it something that you felt like you had to kind of come out to your parents about, or was there a process with that?
I certainly was in tune with my like sensitivity as a kid. Like I felt like there was a real tuned in that I got a sense that maybe it wasn't so common, but it wasn't until I was a teenager that I was, a bit more aware of my attraction to both, boys and girls at that stage. So it was a slowly unfolding process, and because it was kind of a more soft bisexual experience in my teens and early 20s, I didn't really feel that like strong urge for a big coming out moment. It was, with my friends, it was more just like I would bring a guy along to the party, and they'd just like get a sense that, oh, okay, Dabaco's connecting with that person a little bit more than friendship. And I'm really grateful that they were really chill and accepting around that. And it, unfortunately, well, to give a bit of a red hot story, my relationship in Berlin, the one that collapsed and sent me on the path to work with a therapist, my ex-girlfriend, the one that I was seeing, found out that I was cheating on her. And, that was a really hurtful moment because she, found my journal, my diary that had some information in there that was, really difficult for her to see. And she actually got in contact with my mum and like disclosed a whole lot of that information, and, you know, suggested that I'd given her STIs and I was out of control and I needed to be, you know, taken back to Australia. And so that was a pretty brutal and harsh way for my mum to really get a sense of what my sexuality was. And
that was the first time your mother knew about?
Officially.
Oh my goodness.
She got it in an email in the middle of the night back in Sydney while I was in Berlin. So that was a difficult time, but she took it so well. Like, I'm so grateful for my mum being the woman that she is, and she's journeyed so many difficulties. Even to this day, she's on a cancer journey right now. And she's incredibly strong and resilient. And, you know, she told me a really lovely story to comfort me, where when she broke up with her first husband, he tried to like get her in strife with her dad by saying, you know, she's been smoking weed and she's out of control. and my granddad was just like, yeah, whatever, mate. Like, jog on.
Yeah, that's the worst that they've got, you know.
And she told me a story where she was in a really like, distressed state during a breakup, and she went in and she got scissors and she chopped up all her ex's clothes in the wardrobe. And I'm like, thank you, Mum. This makes me feel so much better, because I was obviously in a very dysregulated space on my own in Berlin during
dark night of the soul.
Night of the soul. But also, you know, a blessing that came of that was seeking out a therapist, and here I am, a psychotherapist now myself, helping others in their dark night of the soul moments.
What's really beautiful to me about that is your mum is almost like a Gestalt therapist to you in that moment. She's saying, she's saying, I can hear, I'm hearing what you're saying. You're in a lot of, you know, you're processing all of this. This is how I've processed similar things in the past.
Yeah. And that was I just really felt her holding me in that moment without judgment, just wanting to make sure that I was okay, because she could see through the words that were emailed to her. She was like, okay, you know, this person's hurting and is wanting to hurt. And that's, you know, very common in a bad breakup.
Yeah.
For her to just come through and be like, Dabaco, I've got you. I've been through some shit myself. Like, I hope you're all right. Do you need anything?
Oh,
incredible.
Wow.
Well, Dabaco, for anyone who wants to find you and find out how to kind of contact you, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
You can hit me up either on Instagram, which is Dabaco Sunset, or Sunset Psychotherapy. I got 2 Instagrams, so find one of them, or sunsettherapy.com.au is my website.
What a pleasure it was to have you on.
It's been a treat. I've loved the chat. Thank you for inviting me.
And we're going to get back to you on the names of our genitals.
Keep me posted.
Yes, we will.
Amazing. Thanks so much, mate.
Thank
you.